Eddie Howe faced the media just a short time ago. We had our reporter Keith Downey there for us. Let's speak to Keith now and head up to Newcastle. Hi there. A lot of injuries contend with, isn't there, Keith? I guess what everyone wants to know, what is the latest on Callum Wilson?
Yeah, I think Callum Wilson would have made it 11 players missing for tomorrow's trip to his old club, Bournemouth, if he was unable to play. Eddie Howe wasn't able to give us a definitive on that because he's yet to see him this morning and he's due to take part in training here, which starts in around 15 minutes' time. But Hayley, as you say, it's a crippling injury list for Eddie Howe right now. He's missing 10 players for the trip to Bournemouth tomorrow, and that is before you take into account Callum Wilson. Of those 10, 8 are injuries, most of them fairly long term, and 2 of them suspensions. Midfielder Sandro Tonali, of course, suspended until the end of the season, and Bruno Guimaraes suspended for the match at Bournemouth tomorrow, having picked up too many bookings. The latest, of course, against Arsenal last weekend. The last thing Eddie Howe needs is any more injuries. Of course, Callum Wilson, as you say, was taken off at half-time against Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League in midweek, and this is what he had to say with regards to his attempts to have him in the squad for that trip to Bournemouth tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what he had, a tight hamstring. We're doing various tests. He's been called up for England, so we're waiting to see if he'll be fit for this game and then make a decision after.
Eddie, from what you said there on Callum, is it a decision will be made today? Are you seeing him in training? Is that? Yeah,
I'm going to see how he arrives this morning.
Any concerns that he's been called up for England, given the hamstring issue that saw him withdrawn at the weekend, midweek? Sorry.
No, I don't think so. I think Gareth and England and ourselves will be in constant communication anyway, as we are with all our international players, to make sure their welfare is thought about at all times.
Away from injury news, did Howe have any response to the news this week that Premier League clubs are now set to vote on a potential ban of loans between shared-owned clubs, because that affects Newcastle United, of course?
Yeah, Hayley, of course that does affect Newcastle United. They're owned by the PIF of Saudi Arabia, and 4 clubs in the Saudi Pro League are also owned by the PIF of Saudi Arabia. And within those 4 clubs, of course, there's some of the top players in the world. That news broke this week that member clubs of the Premier League are set to vote on a ban of loans between party-related clubs, which would, of course, close the door on any moves for players from the Saudi Pro League moving on loan in January to Newcastle United. We know that Newcastle, of course, have a long-standing interest in Al-Hilal midfielder Ruben Neves from his time at Wolves. I think Gabriel Vega, who plays for Al-Ali, is another player that Newcastle are interested in, and it would appear that some of the other Premier League clubs are worried that Newcastle strengthen in the January transfer window in terms of potential loan signings. So obviously, as you say, that would affect Newcastle United. And Eddie Howe was asked on that this morning. He was quite political in his answer, but reading between the lines, it's probably something that the powers that be at the club here aren't too happy about. But this is what Eddie Howe had to say on the matter at his news conference here in the last hour.
Well, we've been watching events as everyone else has, and we'll wait and see what the result of that vote is. I think it's very difficult for me to comment sort of from our perspective. I think I'll let you make assessments on what's happening.
It was an anniversary week as well, isn't it, this week? 2 years since Eddie Howe, of course, appointed at the club. Has been quite an upturn in fortunes. Who'd have thought 2 years later they'd be where they are?
Yeah, Hayley, it's been a very quick 2 years actually. When you look at it now, remember when Eddie Howe took over at Newcastle United, they were right down at the foot of the Premier League table and battling relegation, and the initial aim was just to stay in the top flight. Of course, they got to work in that January transfer window 2 months after he arrived and signed the players that helped them stay up. Since then, of course, Newcastle have reached the Carabao Cup final where they lost to Manchester United. They finished in the top 4 last season, qualifying for the Champions League, and that allowed the supporters to have days out like what they had in Dortmund on Wednesday. Yes, the result wasn't what they wanted, but I think for the 15,000 or so fans that travelled over to Germany this week, they certainly enjoyed themselves, and it's allowed them to feel like they're back in the big time again. They've had a fairly solid start to the season, it must be said, given their injury situation. And this is what Eddie Howe had to say with regards to his 2-year anniversary at the football club.
Well, I think we're in a better place. It's been an incredible 2 years. I mean, I think when you get an anniversary, I don't know what you're like in your life with anniversaries and everything. But you sort of get a realisation of how quick time goes, and I think that's when people said it's 2 years. It's like, wow, it's just gone by in a flash. But then you look back at some of the memories within that 2 years, and it's been an amazing period of time in my life, hopefully in everyone's life connected with Newcastle. I think it's been a brilliant 2 years, and I can't thank the board of directors, the owners, the players, the supporters for everything that they've given to help the team perform, and I hope it's the start of more years and more success, but obviously we'll wait and see.
I just want to add, Hayley, that wasn't me who said they're rubbish anniversaries. It was one of the other journalists in the room. I'm very good at them. I will want to add at this point. But yeah, listen, I think we'll have a bit more from Eddie Howe throughout the day, because it was a very short answer from Eddie, which we heard a moment ago, regarding the situation regarding the loan deals for Saudi players potentially coming to Newcastle United. He went into a little bit more detail. He was pressed on it throughout that news conference. So we'll hear more from Eddie Howe on that throughout the day as his team gear up for that trip to Bournemouth tomorrow without 10 players, 8 injured, 2 suspended, as he looked to try and keep that unbeaten Premier League run going that's been ongoing really since September. It's a match you can see live on Sky Sports tomorrow, 5:30 kick-off, Bournemouth against Newcastle United, as Eddie Howe takes his team back to his old club.
He does, and Keith, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, there it is. Just to reiterate, as Keith said there, it is live from 5 tomorrow on Sky Sports Premier League and main event.